So I wanted to say a few words about Parkside. If you don't know us, what do we do? So basically, we're a bunch of friendly people in software development, UX design, data science, and other areas. And yeah, together we're trying to build beautiful software that works. And maybe next slide, just a few facts about us. So we celebrated our 15 years of Parkside. I think last year it was. So founded 2007 and now almost 120 people over multiple locations. Headquarter here in Graz, where you're all sitting or standing. But now we also have a location in Porto since 1 or 2 years, and recently also in Switzerland, in Basel. So very international team setup, not just because of our locations, but even in Graz, we have more than 22 nations, which is a very multi-culti team and makes a lot of fun, of course, working together with different nationalities. Exactly. Maybe one last thing before we move on to the next slide that we're very proud of this year, or actually I think this year we won the Red Dot Award for user experience design and got that handed in Singapore for one of our projects where it's about a recruiting platform with AI. So very proud of that. And that shows also our focus on user experience, which is what we are all about at Parkside. So yes, we have a lot of software engineers and software developers, but we try to really focus around UX in everything we do on a daily basis. And that, of course, involves also having a dedicated big user experience team here at Parkside. And all of those roles, cross-functional teams, of course, we also work in an agile way, and due to our agile mindset and workflows, we try to bring all of those people together to create successful and user-friendly products. And that's mostly about what we do. And maybe last slide, just to quickly mention what clients we work for. So I guess a few of those names you have heard. Of course, we're very proud of working for LinkedIn since multiple years, but also Shutterstock might be a name that is familiar. But also, of course, we have local companies in Austria and in the DACH region that we very much like working together with, like Knapp, Magna, Strabag, and so on. But very versatile companies, which makes it, of course, a lot of fun working at Parkside, and it's a new challenge every day. And that's about it. I think there's just one slide left. That's me. So I'm Thomas. If you want to know more about Parkside, please reach out to me. Otherwise, I will hand over to our first speaker. No, something about photos I've heard, right?
That you already managed, but one more thing before we actually start. Could you share? Exactly. So if you have any questions, we are using Slido. So please take a picture of this QR code and scan it, and then you can actually ask questions, which will be answered afterwards, after the talk. Perfect. With that, we can actually move forward, and the first part will be our nice remote presenter, Nico, and he will start his presentation. Thank you.
Which you should hopefully be seeing now, right? Perfect. So, yeah, actually, basically the introduction to both of our talks, because we found a very nice break kind of in the middle to go from my talk into what Stefan will be telling you about. First off, I will start and tell you a bit about peer programming as a way to increase team quality. And do not worry, I will annoy you with definitions in a moment. And after I told you a bit about that, I will hand over to Stefan, who will then tell you a bit about pair programming in practice with a lot of practical experience and knowledge from the use of wirecube. And to get started, I know slides take a bit to arrive on site. I can see it in the video. A bit about us, a very simple slide. I will start because I'm already talking. I'm Nico. Some of you might know me. Some of you might realize that I currently look very different to my picture. That is because of Movember, so it can only get worse. I'm growing a mustache for a month now. And the more interesting thing, I think, for this talk, I'm currently a team lead or team captain at Dynatrace. And basically, I would say for more than 3.5 years now, I have mostly worked with distributed teams where I think we will see that especially pair programming can really, really be helpful to team quality if you are in a remote or especially hybrid setting. And with that, over to Stefan.
Hello, so my name is Stefan. I've been working at wirecube since its inception, and I've been fortunate to shape the way we create software in wirecube, starting as a developer and now leading our custom software development projects. And I hope to share some anecdotes from practice on how we are doing pair programming.
All right, cool. Then I will get started. As said, I promised you some definitions. What do I actually mean when I say peer programming? Peer programming for me is just a way to kind of collect both one-on-one, two people working together in pair programming and the group work mode where people work in mob programming. So overall, I would say peer programming, just the definition to say collaborative development work. And you might know these things in different names. You might not actually like to call mob programming anymore. Some people do. I really like that visual of an angry mob with pitchforks scouring around a laptop to write some code. So I will always call this mob programming. And with that, a few questions where I can luckily at least see the on-site audience. Who has actually done pair programming? Hands up, please. Quite a lot of people. A slight questioning. I might have done pair programming, but I'm not sure. That looks interesting in front. Probably less frequent. Who has actually done mob programming? I see 2, 3, 4 hands. Awesome. Amazing. And now the really hard one. Is your team actually frequently doing that, or is it just something you tried once and then you stopped? So who is frequently doing pair and mob programming? Cool. Fewer hands than before, but still quite a lot. Amazing. And with that, I've annoyed you enough. From now on, it's only rhetorical questions. I will answer them. Why are we actually doing this? Why are we doing peer programming in general? 2 very common reasons, or the usual reasons we see, will be it's a really great tool to get a senior engineer together with a more junior engineer and use it for learning, knowledge sharing. It allows us to share knowledge in a very direct way about where can I find things in code, how do I do things, how should I approach a problem. That is one great and very common use for especially pair programming. The other usual thing that you probably know, or the argument that you know, it's for code quality. It replaces things like pull request review and allows us to get 2 pairs of eyes on a piece of code that we're creating. These are usually the reasons. There are, however, also quite a lot of criticisms why we shouldn't be doing it. The biggest one, I think, for me really also is there's not really any proven benefits. There's very few actual studies on it. And there's actually one that's been cited for, I think, 30 years by now, or 20 years. And that one actually focuses on students in university working in a group setting rather than alone. So there is very little or no real scientific data that would say, hey, peer programming, that makes sense in a professional setting. Kind of following on from that, it's also usually criticized as being inefficient, right? We go from one developer producing thousands and thousands of lines of code, and please do not use that developer productivity measure, not even McKinsey does. But anyway, if we would, then we would go from thousands of lines of code produced by one person to suddenly we need 2 to do the same amount of code. Maybe even less because they talk, they need to take breaks. It's just really inefficient, right? If you look at it from that way. And the one I actually find the most interesting is it's usually pretty difficult for people to get into that collaborative way of work. There's usually some resistance, no, I don't want to do that. And that, I would say, is really the interesting viewpoint. Why is it difficult for people? I would argue it's very often difficult because it puts us in a lot of situations where we need to be vulnerable. We go from only sharing our code and our thought processes after they're done, right? I get some moment to polish what I've done and only then share it to people, to really sharing both of that as I'm creating that. And that puts me into much more vulnerable situation than otherwise. I would argue that's a really, really big point of why people are usually slightly uncomfortable with starting it. Cool. So I just told you a lot of negatives, right? Very few positives. People don't actually like it. Why on earth should we be doing this? Very rhetorical question. I gave you the answer in the title. It's for team quality, right? And what do I mean with team quality? More definitions. For me, it's really three things that make a great team experience. One is trust. A great team is made up of individuals that trust each other fully. That team also has a shared vision of where they actually want to go to together. And they take shared ownership of that journey to get to that vision. These three things really, trust, shared vision, and shared ownership, is what I would say makes team quality, gives you a great team. And the nice thing is that peer programming actually helps us a lot with all three of these things, because it creates and fosters situations that help with trust building, that help with creating a shared vision and taking shared ownership of what we're actually creating. And one pretty big part I already mentioned is it requires us to share unpolished work and kind of unpolished thought processes as they're happening with our teammates, with our colleague, one-to-one, or with the whole group. And it removes the really comfortable situation where we work in our own little chamber only when we're done with our work, when it's nice and polished, tested, all the bugs ironed out, and all the rough edges removed. Only then do we share it with someone else. And suddenly it puts it in a situation where all of that is gone and we share stuff as we're creating it. And on the one hand, that puts us into that situation of vulnerability where suddenly I don't show only my best work, I show my probably really crappy work while I'm thinking about how it works. And that makes me vulnerable, but it also allows me to gain a better understanding of my colleagues, and they get an understanding of me. Because we see how we work, how we think, how we approach a problem. And we also will usually see that colleagues don't ridicule us for unfinished thoughts and stuff that doesn't work. No, they're actually there to solve the problem with us, and they're sharing just as much of their ideas and their problem solving and thinking with us. And being in that situation is really, really great benefit to building trust between people. And so with that, it puts us into a situation of vulnerability, but these allow us to foster trust, and vice versa. The more we start trusting our colleague, the more we're willing to just throw ideas out. The more we, the more we trust people, the more willing we're kind of to be vulnerable with them. So with that, really, really great tool, especially in one-on-one sessions, to build trust in a team. The other part, the second big benefit I mentioned, right, is reviewing or changing how we review code. The important part here is it moves when we give, and more importantly, when we receive feedback, to when it's actually best to hear it. If we do pair programming or mob programming, we will actually hear feedback while we're creating something, rather than when we're actually done, when our work is finished. No, so I kind of mentioned it before, peer reviews, I would assume most are familiar with. But in general, if you're familiar with that, you're probably familiar with the situation where you're done with something, you've opened a pull request in whatever tool you're using, you ask your colleagues to look at it, and you're off to do something else. You're solving the next big problem. This thing for you is done. Probably a day later, 2 days later, however big your change set is, or however busy your colleagues are, then do they come back and say, hey, what you did there is wrong. You need to fix it. You need to clean it up. You need to do something about it. And that is the worst possible moment to hear that feedback, because you're busy doing something else. Now, if we're from the start working together as a team or just as a pair, then the feedback to, hey, we should change this, suddenly happens while we're creating it. And most importantly, as I already said, we should change that. It puts you into a moment of collaboration where you are together solving a problem. You're getting feedback and you're working into feedback while you're actively fixing or just doing something. Whereas in the usual mode, we're kind of in a situation of opposition, where after you're done, only then do you go and critique your peers' work. Very, very different from a perspective of actually receiving and wanting to hear that feedback and really working it in. The next part, my slide share changed. The next part that is mentioned, I find really, really important, especially in distributed settings. Pairing and mob programming as well, but more pairing kind of creates collisions between people. And what I mean with collisions is unplanned, spontaneous one-on-one moments to connect and talk. If you're in an office, it's pretty likely that you bump into someone after a meeting or at the coffee machine, or you quickly talk with them over the top of your screen. And I like collisions because it might not always be really positive moments. You might have heated technical discussions, or you might just argue about how the football match last night went and you root for different teams. But they just happen very organically, and they do not happen that much in distributed and remote and hybrid settings. And especially from be that leadership situation, be that as a team lead, be that maybe as a scrum master, agile coach, where you have kind of a different view into the team. One thing that's easy to forget that in these roles, you usually have more one-on-one connection points with distributed people than they have between each other. You might have frequent one-on-ones where you just have a moment every week, every 2 weeks, whatever, to connect with people. Whereas if you're a developer, if you're focused on your coding, you might not have a reason to actually go and just chat and listen to your colleagues. If you're now especially doing pair programming, you have these moments where you're solving a problem together, but you're obviously not going to sit in a Zoom call and work together 8 hours straight. You're going to get sidetracked. You're going to have some discussions. You're going to go away, have a break, talk about, hey, you're drinking tea, I'm drinking coffee, and really get these random moments to connect on a personal level back. It's a very, very subtle, very small thing, but it can, again, for the shared ownership, the shared understanding of us as a team, and the trust between really people and individuals be really, really helpful. Be a huge benefit of tiny thing like, hey, let's do pair programming occasionally. One more. The previous arguments mostly address trust and shared ownership. And I would say, like, the trust part mostly applies in one-on-one and pair programming sessions. It also applies in mob programming. The one thing where mob programming can really especially help us is when it comes to shared vision and building really shared vision of how we want to do things as a team, because it gives us a different creative process where we as a group come together and we work on something and we discuss why we create, how we actually want to do it. And with that, it kind of strengthens our shared vision about how we want to do that work, not just the problem that we're solving, but how do we want to write our code? And it allows work agreements, coding standards, all of these things kind of to emerge organically, rather than needing some special session, an 8-hour workshop with a team where you fight out whether you want to set some rules, or maybe the team lead comes in and says, hey, we should do this code standard. You can do that, but I find it actually a lot nicer to just start working on code together and figure out as a team, what do we really need? Which standards do we need? And if we keep doing that, then it creates, both in mob programming, where we actually write code, and in mob review, where we just gather to discuss some problems, it creates continuous moments where we can refine what we value and how we want to do our work. Should we maybe start doing test-driven development? Should we actually set a fixed amount of test coverage because we're realizing we're not happy with how well tested our code is? Should we change how our classes are named? Do we actually need to write an I in front of all our interfaces, or are we sane people and think that's completely useless? All of these arguments and discussions can really emerge from organic discussions and can be reviewed and refined as we're going. And with that, I am actually already done with my part. I do hope I convinced you that there is a lot more than just code quality and knowledge sharing to reasons why you want to do peer programming. There is huge benefits for trust, especially between individuals. There are benefits for taking shared ownership of your code, of how you work and how you solve problems. And it can really strengthen that shared vision of we as a team are working on something. And I hope with that, you're now really excited to start, but maybe you're not quite sure where you start. And with that, I'm very happy to hand over to Stefan on site, who will give you some pointers on how to get started.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I guess would be easy for me now to say like super easy, just do it. That's it. Turns out in practice it's not that easy for a lot of people. When I started to think about a talk, I thought about, so when was actually the first time I was really doing pair programming? And then I realized that I basically was doing it already in university. And funnily enough, it's one of the things Nico mentioned, that there's a study for pair programming in universities. Because a lot of the group exercises we did were in group settings where we were really using that opportunity because we had kind of unlimited time to just work on things and figure out things together, grow together, and have all the benefits that Nico mentioned previously of pair programming. So we had a shared vision of where we're going. We learned something together. We shared the knowledge throughout our journey. And also we got a shared understanding of how our code should look like, how our solution should look like. Yeah, and then from that onwards, I started at wirecube with a lot of the same people that I already studied before. So our idea was, okay, just basically apply the same principles, we get the same benefits, right? Then the first questions came, so how exactly are you going to do that? And what about some cons? And then a bit of reality hit. And it turns out in a work environment, you have a lot of external factors to deal with, right? You're working against deadlines. You have some important bugs that need to be fixed. You have pressure by, I don't know, needing to release something. And as always, everything is bound by a budget, because how can you bill a customer like 4 times the amount because you say, it's nice that 4 people work on these things together. So how to do this? And the way we came up with was, okay, let's figure out some scenarios, more specific ones, rather than just, okay, let's do pair programming together, where we really see a huge benefit and smaller cons to it, that we say we really stand behind those approaches, and let's do it with a focus on those few use cases. And I have 5 of them prepared now, where the first one I would say is the most obvious one. I think pair programming makes a lot of sense in complex tasks, because that's a case where really you, in the end, if you think about it, you can even save time if you get 2 smart people together talking and thinking about how to solve a complex task, because they can bounce ideas off each other. And it's just usually, from my experience, more efficient, having 2 or even more people working on some complex things, coming up with the ideas to solve it, gain a rough understanding of how to do it, and then what we usually do is then let it be finished by one person. It's enough. It's just using that initial alignment, getting that shared vision, getting the concepts right, knowing where you want to go together, and then it can be finished by one person, and you gain a lot of efficiency with that. Another one is, for us, has been onboarding. So how does pair programming relate to onboarding? So basically, think back to maybe when you were onboarded somewhere, or just think back about, usually people come into companies with huge code bases, and there's just too much. And your task is, get familiar with it. But how are you going to do that? You need some mentorship, and we have seen that it works very good for us, taking people by the hand, showing them, hey, this is the point where I need to start in the code, showing them the way a little bit, and then smart people will find the way throughout it, and you can ping them every now and then to help them, but just giving them that good starting point, giving them enough support at the beginning in some one-to-one sessions where you really show them how this is where you need to go, this is where you find this, and so on. And this has worked very well for us. I guess that leads into the next thing, mentoring. So helping team colleagues which are less experienced. So the typical scenario is you have one senior developer mentoring a junior developer, and how we do it then is we have those senior developers regularly check on the junior developers. If it's some smaller tasks, then it might be less frequently. You might check up with them at the beginning and, I don't know, be at their desk for 15 minutes, have a short session on, do you know what you need to do? Do you know where you're starting? Do you understand what's the goal of this or? And if it's a more complex task, it might also lead to more sessions throughout the task. So you might check in with a junior colleague 2 or 3 times a day for just small sessions where people just then interact with each other, and you have a very easy way of the junior or the one with less experience asking questions, having opportunities to being reassured that they're on the right track. This is the path they should be taking. They are taking right decisions, and also just having discussions. So like learning from each other in that sense that they might bring in some other ideas that even the senior didn't think about, and then coming up with the best solution in the end. Also, one thing where we found it quite useful was for debugging and finding errors together. I think there are like 2 applications for it. One can be if there's just some error that's very hard to find. Same principle as previously for complex tasks. We tend then, let's start to debug together, go to one PC and go through it and just butt our heads together and bounce ideas off each other again. And it usually also, again, works very well. And it's really, you're basically saving time. It's I would say it usually takes one person even longer if you know those moments, you're looking for a bug, you stare at the screen for hours, and you have, I don't know, you just need that one small pointer, and somebody's coming by and telling you, have you thought about that one? And that's basically what we're achieving with this, just pairing people together in those debugging scenarios for difficult things to find. And another scenario we usually do it is if you have a problem somewhere and you roughly know where it's happening. And it might be a specific domain that, I don't know, only half of the team has knowledge of. So then we tend to, in those debugging sessions, take someone in that doesn't have the knowledge in that area, and also get them onboarded in this debugging session, and also let's show them together on how to find that specific thing in that section that they previously were not, didn't have any knowledge in. And for the next time, then you have again more people who can find bugs in more parts of the code base, because in reality, it's never going to be in a team, even if it's super big, nobody will know all parts of the code, because code bases are usually tend to be too big. But if you can spread as much know-how throughout your team so that you're covered for every scenario, I guess that's a good approach of how your team can be set up for the long term and being in a good state. And I guess it also brings me to the last thing, know-how transfer. I guess it's basically what happens in all those previous examples, but how we also tend to do it is proactively plan those know-how transfer sessions via pair programming. So if you plan a sprint, if you plan some work, however you're doing it, think about some task where know that there are information silos, where only 1 or 2 people know about how that thing works. Think about those things in advance, and then schedule those sessions already, and proactively think about, this is something where we really need to share that know-how throughout the team. And then we're usually doing some pair programming sessions to share the know-how, because it's just the easiest thing to show someone else rather than document them, just hand over some things, like really show it to them, have conversations about that code, which in our experience is the most efficient way of sharing the know-how of a big code basis. To sum that up, I think with all my experiences, I can validate some of the theories that Nico had. Like, we are doing pair programming to achieve shared goals or a shared vision, so people know what they're working together as a team, to have a shared know-how. Also, I would say that all goes together into team quality. The more you interact with each other, the more you get to know the people, the more you are involved with each other, and the more you typically tend to care about your team and about your peers and about working together. And also, as I said, that the mentoring aspects, it can be a really good opportunity for growth inside your team if the experienced people take the time to share some of their know-how and their skills with more junior peers. Also, code quality, I totally can agree with that one. And also, I think the point that Nico made earlier, that a lot of those, how is certain code going to look like, what coding conventions, that also usually comes up quite organically, as he said, in those sessions together, because you have the opportunity to talk about things. Not everyone is going to do it the same way. So typically conflicts will arise from, hey, we need a decision there. Then you tend to involve the whole team for a short discussion. And then you narrow it down, okay, that's the way we're going to do it for the future. And also one very big benefit, I would say, is having no solo performers. So I think there was this quote, or there was this picture in a talk I heard at the Agile Austria conference. The best teams are the teams where everyone has this shared vision, the shared goal, they want to achieve the same thing, and also they depend on each other through some way, because otherwise you could just, I don't know, why have a team at all if you have no interconnection? Just have like 5 people doing their silo of work. You don't need a team for it. You don't need all the overhead of a team for it. But if you want to have a good team, then there also needs to be some dependency between the peers, working together, helping each other out, sharing know-how. And I guess that's all things that we could see can be helped with pair programming. Then some lessons learned from the things we tried that didn't work, or how we're doing it. I would say the most important one, each team is unique. A lot of the things we might be doing won't work for Nico because they're having a way more remote setup than we do, because we're having a rather on-site approach where we really can come together, so that there's no need for those having a lot of one-to-one calls, because our colleagues typically sit together in the office, so there's no barrier of approaching each other. So just treat every team differently depending on the circumstances, and I think different approaches would work on different teams. Step by step, start with small sessions. And I guess we're still doing small sessions. So start with half-an-hour sessions, maybe an hour sessions. Don't go, okay, now we are doing pair programming and let's do this half-hour day because we're working on a complex thing. Not sure that will work out in the beginning. Maybe it never will. I don't know. We haven't had very good experiences if the sessions you're doing are too long, because you lose focus, you get sidetracked, and people just usually get annoyed. And I don't know. There's some fine line of starting out and being very productive together into, okay, it's too much and I want to just do the work on my own. And I guess that also leads me to my next thing, start together, but work individually afterwards. So that's one thing we typically do. We very rarely finish pair programming sessions together. So we start off together, we get the ideas right, we know that we understand the goals, we know where we're going to, we solve the big things maybe at the beginning, and then we let one of the persons finish it individually. And that's also, I think, one major thing where you can combat the inefficiencies which would otherwise appear a lot. In our experience, it's also very important, get experienced people involved early. So I think if you have a team and none of the senior peers is willing to participate in those things, is not willing to share their know-how, is not willing to do those things, I would say forget it. That's really the gist of it. But if you manage to get your experienced people involved early, I think it can be a really useful tool to just leverage the whole skill set of the whole team from those experienced people sharing their know-how. Yeah, another one I talked already before, plan sessions for upcoming tasks for the know-how sharing. Really think about, identify where there are some information silos, identify where you really need pair programming to distribute know-how, distribute the knowledge, and plan it in through whatever way you're doing your work planning, but plan for it a bit. And last but not least, make it a habit. It shouldn't be something like, hey, let's schedule some pair programming. Just do it. For us, it's very naturally, organically that, I don't know, if you're debugging something and we find it's very difficult, just two people sit together. So yeah, make it a habit, get it into the heads of the people, and establish that they don't need to really think about, let's do pair programming, but just do it. And I guess that the message I want to share with you at the end is, for me, it's not really pair programming, it's just working together or working together closely. And I guess that's the thing that has worked very well for us. And that's also the thing I'm very behind of that idea, because I've seen it work so good in the past. So yeah, I think the best things can be achieved by working closely together. And I think pair programming can be a great tool to achieve that and facilitate this in your software development teams. And I guess that's it from my side.
Yes. Okay, now it's my part. Hi, everyone. I'm Jelena, one of the organizers. I hope remote you can hear me well. Maybe someone can confirm?
Yes.
Yeah, work well.
Perfect. So I will be the one moderating the Q&A session. So thank you for submitting so many questions to our speakers. And also, if you have some popping up on the way, there is a QR code still there. So first question, how would you pitch pair programming to your boss in one sentence? Nico?
I'm just trying. I'm not going to give you a good answer. I think one sentence probably is too little, and I would put one big caveat. You probably need to know what your boss values, right? If you have maybe some quality issues, the aspect to, hey, this will help us with code quality, so hey, we're much better at giving feedback and creating better software, that might be a great pitch for you. If your boss is really focused on, hey, we're building a great team together, then the, hey, this helps us for our team quality might be a better pitch. But I couldn't give you a one sentence pitch. I think especially as it sounds like you need to sell this, really think about the audience you're selling it to. And I think there's also, as we've seen at the end of Stefan's slides, there's a lot of different options to sell it if you need to sell it. Stefan, do you have one sentence?
No, not really. I hope to have given you some answers at the end, like which might persuade your boss, but I don't know. I hope you work in some environments where teams are autonomous enough that they can establish some form of pair programming by themselves. I don't think you shouldn't need your boss's buy-in. Maybe that's the way how it is for some, then I don't know. But I think it's a team thing, right? If the team commits to it, I don't think you really will need the buy-in from the boss, because they will see the benefits of it sooner rather than later.
Okay, I hope that answered at least partially. The next question would be, some teams have the rule to pair in boring routine tasks, configurations and such. I'm not sure what's the question behind, but oh, we actually can do this. This we did. So any comment on this one? So
I guess
boring,
don't do it.
Boring configuration task. Don't do it. Nico, what do you say?
I would kind of agree. So the thing that Stefan said, I feel is really important. There's no benefit in making it a hard rule. Hey, we need to always do pairing. That's probably just gonna frustrate you endlessly. If it makes sense for a team, hey, cool. So I can just speak to what my team does, both from pairing and mob programming and mob reviews. We started in a more structured way where we tried it a lot. And then we saw, hey, cool, there's places where it makes sense, there's places where it doesn't make sense. And I think that's the right way. There's tasks where you get a benefit, and changing configuration, yeah, it's just replacing peer reviews and pull requests, right? That's probably a waste of time.
Okay. We can move on to the next one. When is it pair programming and when is doing someone else's job?
I think that answer is quite simple. If you do it for the same topic over and over again, then the person is obviously not willing to learn, and then you're really doing the job of someone else. But I would say that happens rarely.
Nico, do you have the same view?
I would have the same view, and I would have phrased it. It's doing someone else's job if only one person works. It's not pair programming if just one person does everything. And that might go a bit into the next question, if I may already jump there. I would absolutely recommend switching people, or in general, I would recommend if you no matter if you're already doing it or if you're starting it, do look into techniques. There are different kinds of pair programming techniques. There is the basic driver navigator where I tell you what to do, you type, and with those, absolutely switch, like maybe switch down to a level of every 5 minutes. And that's where you get away from it's doing someone else's job to we're actually collaborating, we're switching through. And do look into techniques. There's some really interesting ones, like one that fosters test-driven development, where you actually switch off with one person writes the test, the other one makes it pass, and then you switch. The other person writes the test, you make it pass. So do switch and do try techniques, and that gets you away from doing someone else's job.
Maybe I can make it a bit harder for you if I may chime in.
Okay.
Did you ever do it by the book? Like really literally only one keyboard, only one person touching it, and like not that like you sit next to each other and both are coding and chatting about it, but more like one screen, one keyboard.
I would say no.
Thanks for honesty.
Because we usually tend to, I guess, switch up things the way how we think they apply to us and make the most sense to us. And for us, it's just maybe not natural enough that that's strictly one person, but it's rather, I don't know, for us, it's more of a team thingy. It's 2 people, if it's more people, I don't know. And that's why I also think, yes, you should switch out the person typing. So it should be a together thing rather than one person just bringing in ideas.
Good, you passed. And how do you convince the busy senior to free up the non-existent time to participate? Like, why should senior even do pair programming if they can produce so much faster, more codes, features than...
From my perspective, it should be also in their self-interest, right? If there's this, isn't there a quote for if you teach a man to fish, you don't need to feed him? I don't know how it goes, but you know what I mean. If you manage to do one session and show the people what they're supposed to do in that scenario, you won't be bothered again by the same thing, right? So it's basically, if you think about it as a senior developer, it's in your own best interest to, teach people how to do it by themselves rather than always being, I don't have time for these things, and you will be approached again. So there's no way around it.
Nico, anything to add?
I would agree to it. I would kind of add one more part where it's really in everyone's self-interest, right? In general, we do want feedback. No matter how senior an engineer is, you probably still want some form of feedback on your code. So you might have different situations. If you pair 2 seniors, you probably get really interesting technical discussions. That's a huge benefit. Then you pair them with a junior, they need to do some more input, but they might get new perspectives. So there's a lot of value in them as well, or for seniors as well. I guess the more senior you get, if you get to like staff engineers, principal engineers who are on a much higher level and more coordinating than really writing code, probably you really can't get it into their schedule, but maybe they like to pair with another principal level occasionally on some really complex thing. So yeah, as Stefan said, it's probably in their self-interest to get feedback, to work with someone.
But in the end, I think it's also back to my point of it's individual for each team, it's individual for each person. You cannot force it onto people. If they don't see the benefit of it, okay, so be it. Then maybe you find a team of people that don't see the benefit of it, and maybe you find a team of people who see the benefit of it, and then you have the best of it. Because you cannot force people to participate in those things. They need to also actively believe and see the benefit of it to make it really work.
Getting more practical, what tooling do you use? After Code With Me, I can go back to a single screen, single keyboard, align key bind setup. So which tooling do you use? Do you have something special, or?
I mean, as I said before, we are very much together on site. So the tooling is just get together at a PC and work there together. We're not using any specific tooling. It's just maybe getting used to the key binds and maybe keyboard layout of the person PC you're working at, and that's it then.
Nico, what about remote distributed teams? Do you have something in addition?
So from a distributed perspective, I would say a lot of different things. I can agree, Code With Me, that if you don't know Code With Me, it's a part of the JetBrains IDE where you can run either via their public server or your own server, and that it really allows you to work in your IDE, but with someone who's working in their IDE. That is amazing. I kind of get that you can't go back to something else from there. But we also, depending on what kind of pairing, what kind of discussion we do, is it might be you just hop on a Zoom call and then I tell you 4 or 5 minutes what to type, or maybe I type a bit and I actually just make it commit, I push it to shared branch. So tools are fancy, but even remote, you can probably just make do a video call and get that works. And again, I would say pick what works for you right now. So if you say, hey, I'm just doing a small thing, starting an extra ID, starting a special session to make it work, probably overkill. And in the distributed setup, if you actually manage to be on site occasionally, do get to one screen, sit together, because you get the benefit of actually working in person, even if you're going to be sad about the keyboard or the setup. I know some companies actually do, hey, we put more than one keyboard at one workstation and so on. Maybe that's an option. Not for the key bindings, probably more for the I need to use my special mechanical keyboard, but different options. Tooling is really cool, but you can probably do some things without it.
If I may add, like it feels like being in someone else's shoes, in the sense of if you type on someone else's keyboard, it might give you a perspective of that person, in the sense like that they are different. So and acknowledging that different can also then boost the team kind of understanding how everyone is thinking not in the same manner, and then maybe also can overcome some conflicts as well. Like a bit meta from my side, but I was free to jump in with that. Okay, who should be involved in the mob session? So now we are more mob developers, but what about product owner and Scrum Master in case of Scrum setting? Do you think they also should be part of the mob?
I don't know. I don't really start a lot of experience in it in a professional setting. We were just doing it for fun sessions, and yeah, basically everyone participated. Yeah. No real advice from my side.
Nico?
I would maybe I would see a bit of a difference between Scrum Master and Product Owner. If you are in a Scrum setup, it might actually be really helpful if you want to stick to certain rules to just have a Scrum Master kind of to moderate how you do your mob programming session. That can always be helpful. in terms of adding product people, maybe UX, whoever you have. I would say it depends on what you're actually working on. If you say we want to get together for 2 hours and kind of hammer out a POC and figure out how we even want to solve a problem, super idea to get product owners, UX people, and so on into the room and really work on that concept together. If you're already maybe you have an epic, you kind of try to figure out how do we technically really best the project, where should code go? Probably not too much value to have a product owner or someone who's not super technical there. So depends on what you're working on, and then think about, does it make sense for these people to be there?
Thank you. And what about the cons and pros of pair programming, depending on the team structure? I let it sink.
I mean, I would say yes, as everything, it depends with a lot of things. So I guess that's a short answer. I'm not sure what the long answer to this question would be.
Maybe I can try for a long answer. I think what we're kind of getting in here, does it actually make sense to pair people who don't know the same things and don't have the same viewpoint? I think the pros, especially if you're cross-functional and really work as a team and manage to work as a team, all of the team quality benefits apply. Depending on how far away you are, obviously pick the problems where maybe it doesn't, maybe there's things where it makes sense. Hey, let's get a business analyst and a developer. If that's how cross-functional you are, there can be tasks perfectly fitting to that and others where it doesn't make any sense. So the con would be if you enforce it as a rule, you pair people who don't have any benefit, and then you get one person working and one watching. The pros, I think, always are the team building aspects. For platform teams, I don't really see that much of a difference to like a, I don't know, value stream team. Depending on how you're set up, it can be a question of knowledge sharing, and that's kind of how I, having worked with platform teams quite a bit, you usually end up with a lot of ownerships and a lot of knowledge, and you might need to start the question, hey, does it make sense to pair the guy who knows about databases with the girl who knows about our, I don't know, software product that we're building? Are they actually learning things from each other that they really need to know, or are we trying to broaden their knowledge too far? So con might be to both pair the right people and accept that it maybe doesn't make sense to share some knowledge or work on things together. Very long answer, sorry for that.
Okay, it's a complex question. Back to the best practices, especially the remote setup tool practices, switching roles, maybe that one we didn't cover in particular. I mean, except doing it frequently and switching frequently, but any additional advice you have to add to this?
I would
Maybe.
take it, and I would just add to, like, as I said, there are quite a few tools that help with that. Your IDE might, I think even Visual Studio Code has a built-in mode for it now, so even free IDEs might give you tools for that. And having a tool makes switching roles and switching around really easy. If I have a tool that allows that, I can really switch every 5 minutes in a remote setup. If switching means I need to push my code to some shared repo and I need to stop sharing my screen and now someone else shares a screen, probably you want a longer time frame, or you want to try a slightly different technique. So that if you can find a tool that makes it easy, do it. Visual Studio Code for JetBrains is great. VS Code, as far as I know, has a mode for it. And then you can basically do anything. And if you don't have it, really think about longer time frames between switching. Different rules might maybe work better.
Anything to add to that? Okay. What about sessions? Debugging, you were talking about debugging, finding errors. How does that look like? Can you describe it?
I guess it depends a lot on the priority of the thing you're looking for. If it's super important and major, then I guess you gotta do it until it's found, and that can take whatever time it takes. Other than that, I would say, back to my point earlier, I think we are more a fan of a smaller session. So I don't know, up to an hour might be a good thing. Half an hour, start off together, narrow it down, get some ideas where things might be, and then split up and use use the time a bit more efficiently, I would say, than in maybe finding it once you know where the rough thing is. So about a session, about an hour quite fits for us usually.
Nico, anything to add?
You're gonna hate me for another "it depends" answer. I think in general, from our experience, we would also skew to maybe an hour or two, especially if we're talking about mob sessions where the whole team figures something out. It's probably an hour to kind of figure out, split things, discuss some initial code, and then maybe one or two people keep working on it, split or on their own, and maybe they get together for an hour again. I will say there were also moments quite recently where my team was working very focused on one thing that we really wanted to get out. And I think two of our team members actually spent 8 hours in a call with breaks and lunch, obviously, but they basically spent all day working on it together. And in the end, they were like, hey, it's done, it works, we can ship it. I would say that's probably too long, but if you're motivated, if you get into it, that works as well. Start short, I would say, and then see what you need.
Hey, there is a question from Totally Not Confucius. Oh, okay, sorry. Maybe first of all, does it work with more than 2 people in a design session, or do you believe that's not efficient? I suspect this is, again, it depends, but
yes, why not? I mean, for everything creative, I would say more people the better, the more ideas you get in. So might be a good thing.
Any rules you have, like after, I don't know, looping 3 times in the same discussion, maybe breaking it? And speaking of efficiency, if you have more heads thinking, then might also take some time to get into productive.
I guess people are usually quite vocal about we're turning in circles and this is getting us nowhere, so let's stop. But I guess if you keep sticking to some principles of having short sessions in general, then I guess you will stop after that. I don't know, hour is over, or rethink. Is it really, are we making any progress again, or is it did we already like achieve what we wanted to achieve?
Great. So coming back to Confucius, is anyone trying to break up old pairing couples? So does it happen that some people maybe get together too often, that they're always kind of creating a subgroup, and then you as a lead maybe want to break them, and then you say, instead of you two coming constantly together, let's pair with some other people? Do you do that? Do you kind of push a bit more distributed pair programming?
So personally, I haven't seen that much, but yes, I would say, I guess that should be in your interest as a team lead to break up such things, right? Because you're just basically creating a sub team inside your team, which is gonna cause problems on a lot of levels, I would say.
Nico?
So I would add absolutely yes, please do that. There is actually a phrase for that, which is called pair promiscuously. So openly pair with every phone and switch partners, basically. And that is really, I think, where you start seeing the benefits for your team quality and for how you trust each other. If you have 2 people who always work together and then 2 other people who always work together, you get sub-teams, and they might be great friends, but they don't really connect between them that much, and they don't get their different viewpoints. So I think one of the most important things I would say, yes, try and switch it up, and just also pair people who don't usually work together. That's where you really get these benefits of understanding each other and building trust. So yes, do break up pairing couples.
Okay, and Nico, I think this is also for you, if you can slowly share the names of the tools you mentioned. Switching to visual.
Tools in terms of technical tools, I'm kind of try both. So in terms of, where did the question go? In terms of technical tools, is that Code With Me is a part of JetBrains, the IDEs, like IntelliJ, for example. That is super helpful. I can also later type it maybe somewhere or include it after. And then Visual Studio Code, as far as I know, has a mod for that. If it was more tools in terms of techniques, I would really suggest just Google pair programming or mob programming techniques, and you will find 100 articles that kind of cover them. So there are, I think the basic one is driver navigator, where one person types and another person speaks and says. And then there's other things like ping pong, the TDD trade-off thing. Really just Google pair programming techniques and you will find at least 4 or 5 different things that you can try out. I hope
Do you have
that
a favorite?
answers. I would say switching things. The one I did not manage to try a lot, but I really want to and I really like is the one where you do test-driven development. So one person writes a test, the other one makes it pass, and then you switch, because it also forces you to write tests. Haven't done that too much. That would be my favorite.
Okay. We also have one comment that from a personal experience, you learn also how other people are working. So it's not just about like code and debugging. It's also how the other person are doing their job, which tools they're using, keyboard shortcuts, and so on. So do you confirm? Do you?
Yes, can confirm. I mean, one additional thing is you also see a lot of weird things people come up with that work for them, which you're, I don't know, fascinated with, and maybe can educate them a bit with, okay, there would have been an easier way to get this thing running, but yes, obviously happens because you really know how the people are doing it unfiltered, as Nico also said earlier. It's very vulnerable setting, but also a good one to share how you doing things also on the tools aspect and all of that.
Nico, any recent pickup you took from someone by doing pair programming with them?
Good question. Can't actually think of one right now. A little while ago, it kind of goes to like sharing and learning stuff. For us, there are steps where before running some tests, you might need to generate some code, and there's ways in the IDE that we use where you kind of tie these run targets together. So if someone in our team has, before I run my tests, I always run that target, and that's actually super nice and efficient if you change things. Other people hate it because suddenly it takes a few seconds longer. So you can kind of learn different aspects also from different people. One is, hey, this is super efficient if I tie it together, and another goes like, I would never do this. This is way too slow. For me, I learned to tie stuff together, and now I don't have failing tests if I didn't run it.
Maybe last one, more leadership focused. What about some methods for building safe space and encouraging people to, except just saying just do it? Is there any additional like practice or some line or something you do to get people more into pair programming? Because saying them be vulnerable is
I think one thing that helped for us is that we also try to be very active on praising people when they do something good. So usually with all those reviewing things, you tend to always point out the negative things. Here you forgot your test, that coding style is wrong, stuff like that. I think one thing we are doing, which combats this negative base vibe a bit, I would say, is having a lot of positive comments in there. Great solution, good approach, and stuff like that throughout, to just have it a more neutral thing and not it's all criticism and criticism or bad criticism. I don't know. It's just talking about things, and there's good and there's bad. And I think it's important to talk about both, and also, yeah, point out the good, point out the both, point out the bad.
Nico?
To one fully degree, agree. I think in general, like you need failure to be a positive thing in your team, right? Doing something wrong means I can learn something. I think very specifically, it depends a bit on people. I think the benefit of if you do pairing sessions, you're in a much smaller space for that feedback, so it can be easier for that space to be safe. But it helps if people kind of know each other, if maybe you had some team events or so you have some base connection as a person. It gives you, the smaller room gives you a safer space, maybe even if your team isn't super good on giving feedback. The other part, maybe if you're really thinking of, hey, I want to encourage and I want to start pair programming, if you're currently doing pull request reviews, keep an eye on how you give feedback and how you approach feedback. So especially if this is a question maybe from a leadership perspective, Scrum Master perspective, do keep an eye before you move into pair programming on how do people actually talk to each other when it comes to like asynchronous code review. Are they really only nitpicking, or are they focusing on what's the bigger picture? Do they have general discussions? If they're kind of nitpicking and you feel like, hey, this is really a not so nice way of how we give feedback to each other, not the moment to say, hey, now do that in person, because the person who kept getting horrible feedback on pull requests will say, no, I don't want to work with that person in a one-on-one setting. So do kind of, I would say, gauge how safe is it to have one-on-one feedback. It will be safer for people usually than in a group setting. And if you feel like it's not that great, do have a discussion about, hey, why do we review each other's code? Why do we want to work together? And why do we want to get feedback to build a nicer product together, and not to blame people that, hey, you did something wrong and here you wrote it wrong. Not a specific soft skill method, I would say. In general, pair programming can help you with building that safe space because you have smaller individual spaces, but kind of have an awareness as a lead of, is it okay to pair these people, or do I maybe not have the culture of giving feedback in a helpful way? And then rather work on that and make it clear to people, how do you want to give feedback? Why are you giving feedback? What should we be focusing on? But then it can actually help build your safe space slowly from smaller groups into the whole team.
Good. That would be it from the Slido. Thanks a lot. I would hand over to Jürgen to also bring us into the end.
Sure. So I will keep it very, very short. Just have a few more things actually to say. First of all, once again, thank you, Parkside, for actually hosting this nice one. And thank you, Stefan and Nico, for the nice presentation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. As a reminder, we took pictures, we took a video of the presentation. So in case someone doesn't want to be on pictures, just approach us. And please also approach us if you have a potential hosting location, because we are always searching for new hosts.
Or speaker.
Or speakers, or potentially also if you're interested in a topic, but you don't know a speaker, approach us, because we might find a person who could speak about it. And that would be actually a great help for us. The next meetup will be in 2024. So it's usually every 2 months. So end of January, beginning of February, we plan to do the next meetup. And that's it. For the remote people, Stefan and Nico will be there for some time to discuss. And then Stefan will also join us within here to further discuss through. And for the on-site people, you have some time to mingle, and of course also some food and drinks sponsored by our lovely hosts once again, Parkside. Thank you.